Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Sahra Nguyen. Sahra is the founder and CEO of Nguyen Coffee Supply, the first specialty Vietnamese coffee company importing directly from the source and roasting in Brooklyn, New York. On a mission to transform the coffee industry through diversity, inclusion, and sustainability, Nguyen Coffee Supply has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Vice, New York Magazine, New York Times, Forbes, Fortune, and honored with the 2019 StarChefs Rising Star Award. Early January 2020, Imbibe Magazine featured Sahra Nguyen as one of the Imbibe 75 people, places, and directions that will shape the way you drink in 2020. She is a Gold House Collective founder for Spring 2020 Cohort, a leading network to celebrate and elevate the Asian American community. In 2021, Nguyen graced the July cover of Food and Wine as one of their 25 game changers. Sahra, we're so happy to have you back on the Asian Hustle Network podcast.
Hey fam, I'm so happy to be back. Thank you for having me again.
And for you guys that don't know, Sahra was actually our first podcast to kick off 2021, and she'll be the first podcast to kick off 2022. And she has done so much in 2021. We're so excited to hop right into it. Sahra, tell us about some of your wins of 2021 and what was going through your mind during this massive growth for your company?
Oh my gosh, the wins. I have to gas myself up. Jeez. You know what's crazy? So we are sitting here right now. It's like December 2021, and I feel like this year has just gone by so fast that you're asking me to think about the wins this year, and it all feels so far away. I'm trying to remember what happened, and I'm like, okay, let me think about oh my God, Drew Barrymore was this year, right? The Drew Barrymore show was this year, and that feels like so long ago. The Food and Wine cover was this year. Holy shit, I still can't believe that happened, right? And it already feels like a distant memory. Good Morning America was this year.
Oh my God, we have to make you reflect on all your wins, and we want to hear more details into what was going in your mind and how these type of events happened for you. How did it all fall into place? We just want to hear more about that.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so great question. So you were absolutely right. I think one of the things I realized a lot this year is I need to really make more time to reflect and celebrate the wins, big and small. Even this year, we transitioned to new packaging for our 5-pound bags, which is such a big win for us. Because as a small business, when you can transition from stock white bags to custom 5-pound bags, that's a big deal for us. It means we were able to meet an MOQ, you know? But we didn't even have a chance to really celebrate that or announce that to the world. And things move so fast. I am constantly you need to really make time to acknowledge what's happening. Otherwise, what's the point, right? But more specifically, so yeah, just going back in the first half of the year, we had some incredible wins. We were on the Drew Barrymore show twice. We were on the cover of Food and Wine magazine. First entrepreneur ever to be in the cover, first person in 7 years to be in the cover. We were on tons of news media shows like Bloomberg and Cheddar News, and more recently, Good Morning America. So to be totally honest, you all, from the first half of the year, I haven't had PR since September of 2020 to July of 2021 this year, right? So Drew Barrymore, Food and Wine cover, all the press we've gotten in the first half of this year were all through inbounds. Drew Barrymore, as associate producer, just DM'd me. Someone from Food and Wine emailed my hello at inbox, right? Those are all just inbounds, and I was really just so touched, and it really spoke to the power of our story just growing and resonating to a point where people just reached out to us, right? And candidly, after the Food and Wine cover, I did bring on a PR team to support our growth during that time and also to support us into the holidays. But so much of how this happened really, I'd say, was just all the work we built up in 2019 and 2020. So, great PR can happen on its own, especially with today's social media. If you're doing your thing, telling your story, being authentic, and it resonates with people, good PR can come to you on its own.
Wow, that is incredible. And, if Brian and I didn't already say it, we just wanted to say we are so incredibly proud of you. to the wholeheartedness. Like, we are so proud of you, and it's just so amazing to see all of the success for you. And when we saw you on the Drew Barrymore show, and like we saw you start posting it, and everyone started talking about it, we're
We
just
like
like,
that immediately. We
wow.
saw it and boom, like
We're just like, oh my goodness, this is such a remarkable like milestone, you know, for Nguyen Coffee Supply, for the Asian community, for just like Vietnamese coffee in general. Like, this is telling so much, you know, just for the community and for like Asian, you know, food and beverage and just the whole Vietnamese coffee culture, right? And I think it speaks to so much volume. What do you think made such a big sound in this whole thing? Like, I think it is really telling a lot, because I think a lot of people are starting to realize that there is so much authenticity in Nguyen Coffee Supply. And a lot of people, we talked about this in the first episode with you as well on our podcast, a lot of people are starting to wonder, like, what's in my food and what's in my beverage? I want to know like the full transparency, like where this is coming from, right? Like, how is it being made? Is it being made ethically, right? And I think it's telling a lot about like what our culture is starting to become. What do you think made it so, you know, so big? And like, why do you think people are like trying to know more about it? And why do you think all of these news sources like Good Morning America and Drew Barrymore show, they're starting to reach out to you so suddenly and starting to wonder, like, you know, what it is about Vietnamese coffee that is so groundbreaking in this
I
time
also
right
want to
now?
add more to that question too. What was your mental preparation coming on to like the big stage like that? Because I feel like the way you made it sound is like it happened so quickly and so abruptly. Sometimes like I read your post to like less than a week notice. How did you mentally prepare yourself to like speak about this and like go on stage and be confident? It's so scary in my mind. So I want to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, great question. So I'll answer Brian's question first, sure, then I'll expand on yours, Maggie. So like tactically, the way I prepared for the Drew Barrymore show, which was like my first national televised, the way I prepared for the Drew Barrymore show, which is my first nationally televised appearance, which is very nerve wracking for me, because while I do a lot of speaking, podcasts, and media interviews, I've never done national TV, so I was super nervous. But the way I prepared for that was, they did prep me with like a set of questions that Drew would potentially ask me. And so what I did was I just answered all those questions in my brain, and I just kept answering and repeating the answers in my brain for days leading up to the interview and the filming, so that when I was on set, it was already like muscle memory, right? But of course, once I got on set, Drew totally went off script, asked questions that weren't even a part of like the prep script or anything. But I think because I had been mentally preparing like my words and my values and my voice and my story and my perspective, things came out really naturally, right? And to be honest, once I was up there with Drew, she was a great person to work with. She really is as down to earth and genuine as she appears. And I really felt like when I was up there, like the cameras kind of disappeared from me, and I felt like I was able to really connect with Drew on just like a human to human level. So the answers came out really naturally, right? So that's how I prepped tactically, just repeating it over and over in my brain, to the point where like it wasn't about memorization, but it was about like more muscle memory of like I knew what I wanted to share, right? But I think longer than that, right? I've shared this a little bit in the past with my some other interviews, but part of my journey as a person, a storyteller, and a speaker is when I was in high school, one of the requirements in my public high school was this thing called public declamation, where in every class from 7th grade to 12th grade, for every semester, they made you memorize a speech, right? Or like a poem by like some dead white person. And they made you get in front of the class and declaim it, right? And when I was in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, I was terrified. I thought this like requirement was so mean, because not everyone is equipped to do that. But what changed for me was in sophomore year, when I discovered activism, which you know a lot about. Instead of choosing traditional poems like things from like Robert Frost or Shakespeare or like Benjamin Franklin, I started choosing poems by radical poets, by radical like Asian American poets, like I Was Born with Two Tongues. And one of the poems that I have recited was called this poem called Excuse Me, America, which talks about like racism in America from the Asian American experience. And once I started using like radical poetry to declaim, first it was like pretty controversial with my teachers because like they had never seen that before. But that's when I actually found my voice. And I loved doing that so much, like talking about racism so much as a young person. I went from doing it as a class requirement to competing in the school-wide public declamation, where you had to like memorize a poem or a speech and then go into the auditorium, go on stage and declaim it to the whole like school, right? So I did that in high school. And so I'd say that like my journey to speaking, whether it's here or to TV, has been like a really like a lifelong journey. Yeah. Should I answer Maggie's question now?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I just wanted to say, like, I love that you mentioned how like True Gamer was so warm and welcoming, because that matters so much, you know, like when as much as I prepare and I'm like reciting the answers in my head, they always ask different questions, obviously. And that trips you up so bad, but it really matters that the person that who's interviewing you is like very warm and welcoming. So I love hearing that Drew was like that, because it matters so much.
Yeah. And I think another, just building off of that, Meg, I think another piece is just speak the truth, like speak from your heart, you know, because when you speak your truth, you don't actually need to memorize that. I think oftentimes we want to memorize for like clarity, or we want to memorize to keep it within like 3 sentences. But ultimately, regardless of you're on TV or on a stage, if you're just speaking your truth, it's going to come out like right, you know?
Exactly.
Right. And so that requires you to know your truth and to know what you really believe in, right?
Absolutely.
But to go back to your question, Maggie, about like, what do I think it is that's really kind of creating this rapid fire, you know, connection story? I think anyone who engages with our brand, Nguyen Coffee Supply, they know that, yes, it's about Vietnamese coffee. It's specifically about the bean of the origin, the communities and the farmers. And it's about so much more than the coffee bean, right? It's about this culture that we want to create that's really rooted in promoting diversity, inclusion, and cultural integrity, right? I think these values are values that a lot of people, regardless of whether they're in coffee or not in coffee, whether they drink coffee or don't drink coffee, they can relate to, right? There's so many communities in this country, in this world, that have felt underrepresented, that have felt excluded from the status quo, that have felt underappreciated, that have felt rendered invisible, right? And because our mission seeks to create a world that like really uplifts visibility and representation in general, whether you're Vietnamese or not, whether you're a Robusta bean or not, I think those are the values that really resonate with the wide audience. And I think that's why so many people easily come on board with our mission and then eventually our brand.
I love that. I love that a lot, Sarah. And, you know, since just I agree, there's so many people that resonate your brand, and I kind of hope that we can start talking about how we pronounce Nguyen in Vietnamese is Nguyen Coffee Supply.
Nguyen.
As a fellow Vietnamese, so I'm kind of curious too, because you know we've seen a lot of rapid growth, not only from your personal growth level and your brand level, but we also watch your team kind of grow in number as well in terms of your hiring. How has that posed a challenge for you as you're scaling up your company? Because right now it's like we're going through a lot of different things, right? The pandemic, the great resignation, you know, people are now quitting their jobs and recruiting super hard. Like, how have you been able to overcome those challenges and continue hiring the right people? And how has been the hiring process for you like?
Yeah, great question. Just for some context, if you're listening, our team today, we're currently 6 full-time, that includes myself, and then it's 7 part-time in a production facility. I think when we started, last time we did this podcast, it was like 2 full-time, and then maybe like 2 or 3 in our production. So we more than doubled. And really proud to say that our full-time team is 50% women, 50% men, and we're 100% POCs, Asian Americans. And then in a production team of 7 part-time people, we're about 78% POCs and 71% women. So we're like a women dominant team across the board. And so how has the hiring been? Hiring is difficult for a lot of reasons. I'd say first, for us as a small business, we have very limited resources. So oftentimes I feel like we can't hire like the most expensive people, whatever that means, right? Which is fine for us because we really enjoy working. Everyone on the team hustles really hard, right? But when it comes to just like what is our competitive pay in like the market? Are we in the 50% percentile, like 75 percentile, 100%, right? We're not in that top percentile. So we try to, try to like boost, we try to create a compensation package that is equitable and fair. That includes, we offer health insurance now, we offer a wellness stipend, we offer solid salary, and we make salary adjustments everywhere we can. And we also offer equity for different members of the company, depending on their experience and stage level. So I think like economically, it's hard because a lot of startups out there are like VC funded, or they have lots of money, so they can like hire, they can pay a lot, right? Pay a lot more than us. But I would say the thing that's been a little bit challenging, but I'd say the good thing about us is that we are able to attract really passionate people, and people who are they really want to be a part of our mission, and they really bring their full selves to elevating and uplifting the mission. So and I think that's something that we uniquely offer as a company. I think what we offer as a company in terms of the mission, the ability to make an impact in the world, the ability to change the world, the ability to be a part of a successful or growing, company, is something that's really attractive to a lot of people. So as people are like going through the great resignation, leaving companies where they don't feel fulfilled, or leaving companies where there's like limited growth opportunity, I think we offer that, right? So it's a trade-off in every situation. But I think as we think about, 2022, we want to grow more. We want to grow our bandwidth more. We want to grow our team more. For me, one of the challenges I think through is, how do you grow when you're intimate? Like, everyone is really, really tightly aligned, right? It's just easier that way. As you grow and expand, your net kind of widens. And so how do you kind of like keep the mission, the culture really tight as you expand your team? So that's the challenge that I've been looking forward to in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great problem to have, to be honest, to like figure out culture. But that is also a very big problem for a lot of founders too. It's like your startup phase, being a startup CEO versus like being a mature CEO is a completely different mindset. And you have to notice like different nuances of how you make decisions can affect the entire team. It can't just move so quickly that it's like, whoa, everyone's caught off guard. Can you imagine catching like 50 or 100 people off guard? You have to be fully aware of the ramifications of your decision. So we're super excited. Hopefully we'll have you back on at the end of 2022 to see what that process is like. And again, as you said before, we love to continue having you back year by year to like document from Sarah now to Sarah the unicorn.
You're so sweet. Oh my gosh. Yes, manifest.
Yeah. So speaking
Brian,
of,
can I add to that? Because you made me think of something in terms of team and hiring. What was I going to say? Sorry, you were speaking, it inspired a thought. Team and hiring, expanding. Oh, the other challenge that I experienced through hiring that I'm constantly working through is how to find the right people for the role, right? And it's not just the right people for the role, but it's also the right people for the environment of the startup, right? And I try really hard to communicate the realities of a startup when I'm interviewing people, especially for the full-time roles, right? Because that we live in a time right now where startups are super sexy. Everyone wants to be part of a startup. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Everyone wants to be in this startup world. And yes, there are it's always a trade-off, right? However, startups are very, very difficult environments. And oftentimes you don't realize how difficult it is until you're in it. And it's really hard. And I try to manage people's expectations by communicating it, but sometimes you don't know what's in there. And this is why startup environments are very difficult. One, startups are fragile. Like you mentioned, Brian, we're not a mature corporation of 1,000 people where if someone doesn't do anything for 3 weeks, no one's going to notice, right? But if we have 5 people and one person doesn't come through with something, that's 20% of our output, right? And because startups have a limited runway, our startup has a limited runway, right? We're not infinitely funded. If we don't come through, startups will die, right? And that is just the reality of a startup. That's why it's so difficult. And so for me as a leader, one of the things I'm also managing is like, how do you build like, a work-life culture that is healthy and sustainable and is real about the fact that we do need to push ourselves, right? I don't ever want to seem like a slave driver, like I don't want to promote hustle culture. That's not it. Everyone gets plenty of time off with weekends. We have an unlimited PTO policy now. We have a wellness stipend now. We're really flexible. with time off for testing and COVID. We don't penalize people who take time off for testing. Even with our part-time team, we pay people for 60 minutes of timed breaks, scheduled breaks, to make sure they take their breaks and it's paid, so they don't feel like I don't need a break, I don't want to lose money, right? So we do our best to promote, a healthy work culture. And I believe that in order to grow, especially in startup environments, you have to be uncomfortable. You have to push yourself to the edge to know how far we can grow and how much we can develop, right? It's just kind of this weird balance of managing the expectation with people of like, yes, you have to work hard here. We're not going to work you to the ground, right? However, this isn't like a totally zen environment. It's just not possible here, because if it's super zen, then like we may not survive, right? So it's like that balance. Like we do need to push. We need to push ourselves because it's through discomfort where we grow. And how do we sustain as well? You know what I mean?
You know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
As
Right.
fellow founders ourselves in a very fragile early stage startup, we know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
And I guess speaking of the subject more regarding like, there's obviously never like infinite amount of funding right now. I even believe that even for big corporations, they can all still fail, right? So um with that topic in mind, it's like I'm kind of curious too, like how have the Asian community supported you? Because I saw recently that you received extra funding from Hyphen Fund, an
Yeah.
Asian American organization. What was it like going out and fundraising? I assume this is the
Mhm.
second or third time compared to last time we
It's our third
talked.
time, but they've all been pretty relatively small rounds. But I'd
Yeah.
say it's the third effort I've gone out. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the entire process like? Is it still as draining as the first time and second time? You're like, oh, here we go again. And how
Yeah.
much time have you given yourself to fundraise this time? Or was it very organic?
Oh boy. All right. So we haven't actually publicly announced our round yet, but I can talk about it pretty vaguely. It was definitely the third time I fundraised, and it was the most intense round. It was the most difficult round because the company is a little bit bigger. Our goals going forward are bigger. So, the pressure, the stakes are higher, right? And it was not organic. It was a very, very aggressive, intentional fundraising effort, because I started like in the summer. I had to wrap it by early October because I needed Q4 to fully focus on operating, right? One of my challenges as a solo founder is that I have to fundraise full time and also operate full time. And at that time, it was just me and four full time other people, right? So I'm still very, very deep in the trenches. Like I don't get to just like go off and fundraise and like assign it to like a co-founder, right, to operate. Sometimes some people have that arrangement. So it was really intense for me. And the reason why it was very aggressive was because I knew that I wanted to close around within 2 to 3 months, right? In order to close around within 2 to 3 months, you have to basically just like get all your meetings in as quickly as you can. Like, so I was having maybe like 7 to 10 meetings a week just for investors. And then I have all my meetings for internal team, operations, vendors, distributors, sales, strategizing all these things, right? So it's like 7 to 10 fundraising meetings a week because you want to stack them so that when you have a follow-up meeting in the next week or two, people will ask, how's it going, right? If you have no progress, then you lose momentum and then they lose like momentum. So every time I meet up with someone, I want to be able to say, oh, well, we're like 25% subscribed now. Oh, we're 50% subscribed now. Oh, we're 75% subscribed now, right? And you can only get the momentum if you stack every meeting as urgently as you can, right? So I honestly, when I closed my round, it was the first Friday of October. I think it's October 8th. I felt like I just ran a marathon and I collapsed on the ground and like I could not breathe. Even leading up to that week when I was closing, I had a lot of anxiety around closing because I wasn't like 100% there. I was maybe like 80% there. But I want to close it and I want to be oversubscribed. I had a lot of anxiety that week because I told everyone this is the last day, right? And then it wasn't until like that last day where I like met my goal and went over my goal. But leading up to it, I remember that week leading up to it, I had so much anxiety. I was like locking, like my jaw was like getting really tight because I was like so tense. I couldn't sleep. I was getting headaches from all the tension. And then I also like found myself very short breath throughout that week when I was talking to people and being in conversation. Like I would catch myself not breathing. This is how intense it was. And then when I closed, it felt like I collapsed on the ground for marathon. And I also knew that I was probably approaching burnout, right? It's like the first week of October. I was so mentally drained and exhausted from fundraising and doing operating PR, all this stuff, running the company still. I was looking forward towards Q4, which is our busiest month of the year. It's our biggest sales season as well. And I was like, I don't think I can do Q4 if I don't take a break, right? I was like, I can't use my brain right now. It feels drained, depleted. And so 2 days later, I booked a trip to Paris for 4 days. Like I took Thursday, Friday off, and then Saturday, Sunday was a break. And that was like literally my mental health break, because if I didn't take that break, I think I would have been really fried and burnt out. And I don't think I would have finished the year at all. So, yes. But to answer your question, Brian, about the Asian American community, specifically this round, we have a stellar cap table. I'd say it's our cap table is majority Asian Americans, which I love to see. Hyphen Capital is a huge supporter of ours. The Asian community in general, whether they're behind the scenes or our community publicly, they've all been super supportive. And so really excited. One day I will share a story about like our fundraising, our cap table publicly. And it's going to be about how I'm building a really diverse cap table, right? And how I'm building a diverse cap table filled of Asian Americans, women, women bosses, CEOs, and the full gamut. But maybe that's for the future podcast.
Definitely give yourself a huge pat on the back. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh
Yeah.
your story brought back our own PTSD of fundraising. I
Just
absolutely agree.
just
Go ahead, Maggie.
Oh no, I was gonna say, like, just hearing you mentioning that, like, I remember when you had taken a trip, and I am so glad that you did, because we knew how hard you were hustling, right? But like, no one knows how painful the behind the scenes is actually like, because we rarely talk about that, right? And like, we didn't know that you were going through that, right? But we just saw like how hard you were hustling, and
We
I
had a
remember
feeling you were
when
going through that.
yeah, we had a feeling you were going through that. And when you went on vacation, I remember, I think there was probably like a out of office message that you had that was saying like, I'm not replying. I'm going to try not to reply to messages during this trip. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that she's doing that. And it's so good that you actually were aware that you needed that break, because that's all we need, right? And I'm so glad that you took that break for yourself.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for feeling me and empathizing, connecting.
Of course. So we're so excited to have you back on the podcast because you have a wealth of experience of things you went through in the last couple of months. And for you guys listening, fundraising is a very emotionally draining process. It's very tiring. It's very anxiety filled. And the part when you're like, my mouth was dry, I think my mouth was pretty dry as well when we were fundraising. And I know the anxiety you felt when you described like the last day of like, holy fuck, why isn't no one like sending you the money right now? What's going on? You have to ping them, message them. You're like, okay, this is the closing date. And then you're oversubscribed now. This is a great problem. Where'd I fit everyone else? So that feeling was like, man, like I know exactly what you mean. I sorry earlier I mentioned like you had to people listening to this podcast, give yourself a timeline to like, you don't want fundraising takes a lot longer than you think. And it's a lot more emotionally draining than you think. So you don't want to carry on for like a year, 2 years. Just give yourself a time period and go super hard on it.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's a great tip. It just so people know, I want to clarify, out of everyone I talk to, I'd say out of the total number of people I talked to, I'd say at least 75% of them rejected me, right? And so this is the part that we don't talk about enough, the mental and emotional turmoil and struggle and the work that we have to do internally to work through that rejection after rejection after rejection, right? There are days where like 4 rejections would come in a row throughout the day, and it's like one after the other. And you have to work. There's a lot of work that we have to do as founders to work through that. You cry, you feel shitty, you feel small, you feel rejected, you feel frustrated at the system that just like doesn't believe in women entrepreneurs, all of it. You have to work through all of it in order to keep going, to get towards that. Because people only hear about the close, they only hear about the amount that we raised, whatever. But over 75% of my conversations rejected me, you know? And it's a lot of work to work through that. But you know, it's part of the journey, I
Yeah,
guess.
well, you're done now, Sarah. So you're done
Hopefully for a little while.
for 6 more months. It never ends.
Horrible. This is the worst.
One thing I want to highlight too, your trip to Paris, you actually got
Yeah.
engaged.
Yes, my mental health break turned into an engagement.
Oh my
Oh
goodness.
my
What
gosh,
congratulations on that.
congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, that
That's
was a total surprise. That was a total surprise because I had booked it so last minute, right? Like I mentioned, and Eric's like planned it after I told him, oh, I booked this trip because I need a mental health break. And so he like hustled and got everything together within 3 weeks. Like the ring arrived in Brooklyn to us like
oh my
just a few days
God.
before we flew out. Yeah, so it was a very last minute proposal. I was super surprised, and it was really, really great.
Oh my gosh, we're so happy for you. And Brian and I, for all listeners, Brian and I actually met Eric's once in New York City when we took a trip to New York, and it was such a great experience. I kind of want to talk about Eric's too, because I mean he
He's so
was such like
supportive of you.
he is, and he was like
Yeah.
such a breath of fresh air when we had met him. Like I love his personality and like just his warmth. And he's kind of on like the background, like the behind the scenes. I don't think he like really speaks on camera a lot, you know, but you can tell like he is so supportive, and he is such like an immense support and like success to your company as well.
Yeah.
I want to talk
Yeah.
about like the relationship that you have with him too. Like obviously you guys are business partners and you guys are fiancés now. Talk about that relationship, and like how have you guys been like supportive of each other, and how has that relationship
Yeah.
worked out for you guys?
Oh, thank you so much, Maggie, for bringing it up. Because yes, Eric's is, you know, an incredible asset to the team, to the company, to my life. Like he truly is my partner, and I feel really lucky, you know, to have Eric's in my life as a partner, because he's not just like my personal life partner, but he really is like the closest thing I have to a co-founder. Like, and I'm so grateful. I often say that as a solo founder, if I didn't have this level of intimacy with Eric's, where like I talk to him about everything that happens in the company. I talk to him about everything I go through, whether it's an investor story or, you know, a production story or, you know, a supplier story. Eric's is like my number one confidant. And what's great is that he supports me mentally and emotionally because we are able to have these conversations. So that in itself is a huge lift huge support for me. So he supports me in that way, mentally and emotionally. He's like my trusty confidant. We often go back and forth. I run a lot of my ideas between him. If I'm unsure about something, I'll, you know, like talk it out with him. And then professionally, logistically, Eric's is a full-time member of the team. You know, we've been together since pre-launch. So he's really seen me build this company up just as an idea. And he has offered so much of his volunteer labor in the early days, in the first 2 years of the company. He was in there with me, you know, helping me roast, helping me package, helping me bring, you know, shipments to the post office, helping me do everything, right? So I'm very, very lucky to have such an involved partner. And today he's a full-time designer. So it's great that we're working together. And I feel like as the company grows, he just continues to support me, and I like to think I continue to support him as well in his personal and professional goals. But yes, this level of partnership is really, really unique and special and powerful. And I, like you said, Maggie, so much of my success professionally, mentally, and emotionally has been because I have had such a supportive and involved partner as Eric's.
I love it. I love seeing your relationship grow, and just like watching your Instagram stories of you two getting coffee every morning and just like walking the streets of New York. It's like, I wish I was there with them, because I love seeing your guys' stories of you guys together. It's
You guys
just
are couple
so,
goals
so
for
fun.
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Thanks, guys. We have a lot of fun together. I'll say that. After like 4 or 5 years, like we still have so much fun together, which I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, I guess I mean I'm so happy for you guys. I can't wait to off the podcast we'll double date some more, you know.
Yeah, that's great.
I kind of want to talk a little bit more about like your involvement with the Asian American community, especially towards the end of the year. I know you guys just came back from what is it, the Unforgettable Gala. Like,
Oh, so
what was that experience like to see the Asian community come together and celebrate each other's successes? There's so many notable things this year, like Shang-Chi and watching your
Mhm,
brand blow up, watching Sanzo blow up. Shout out to Sanzo. You know, you guys are
mhm.
just killing it. So, like, what was that experience like?
It was incredible. It was, oh my gosh, I'm still processing it. There was just an abundance of love and joy and support and enthusiasm for each other, for everyone in that room, right? So on the end of like celebrating the accomplishments of Asian Americans through film and media and TV, just being able to witness that moment and witness all the honorees and just reflecting on all of like the major strides we made in media was so cool to see and so inspiring to just reflect on how far we've come as a society through culture and media, right? And just seeing how much more diverse representation the Asian community is getting, and just knowing that that level of representation is only going to grow, was really, really incredible and just so fulfilling to experience. And then there's the place of like being there with like all of like my Asian American CPG founder friends, right? So some context, Sandro from Sanzo, shout out to Sandro, sponsored a community table at the Unforgettable Gala, and he invited all of us to join him in this table, right? So a bunch of us in CPGs, like Sana from Diaspora Co, Vanessa from Omsom, Jeremy from Nectar, Carol from Maku, then myself from Nguyen Coffee Supply, and a few other folks of his friends. And that was like really special. And I think that's really indicative of our generation of founders where we genuinely operate from abundance. Because Santo could have easily just gone to the table and be like, I'm out here, only Santo's here, like none of y'all are here, right? But he didn't do that. He got a table, he brought us to the table. And I think that as and all us founders, we're part of the Gold House Network, right? We've all been through the Gold Rush program. Myself, Samzo, and Fa Beijing were a part of the same year, same cohort, and then Sam was a part of the cohort after us. But I think Carol was actually part of my cohort too, but we were the COVID cohort, so we didn't get to meet. But anyways, so as founders, we've always supported each other. Like I think that's really special about our generation. And then Jing and Fa by Jing also sponsored a table that was right next to us. And so it was so cool for all of us to be there together. And I think one of the really unique and powerful reflections that came about from Unforgettable Gala that Andrew Chow from Boba Guys had mentioned, like, I was, at the Unforgettable Gala, like the title sponsors were clearly like Lexus and Remy Martin, right? And thinking about how like these businesses sponsor these opportunities for stories to be told on screen, right? Like how do movies get made? We need EPs, we need sponsors, we need fiscal sponsors, right? And I think there are corporations, maybe McDonald's, maybe Panda Express that could help sponsor. But then I was like, oh, I see Lexus up there. One day that'll be Nguyen Coffee Supply, right? Like one day, oh, Remy Martin, like that'll be Stanza one day. Like we'll all be like, we can all be like the title sponsors one day, right? As we grow. And it makes me think about this connection of like how consumer brands like Nguyen Coffee Supply shape culture currently through our work of coffee and storytelling. And as we grow, how we can redistribute our capital to further influence and shape culture, whether it's through sponsoring film and media projects or sponsoring scholarships and fellowships or sponsoring accelerators or sponsoring, the next generation. Just thinking about the connection of commerce and products and stories and culture, I at the Unforgettable Gala was just so inspiring. And it made me think about the power and the role and the influence that we all get to play in shaping our futures.
That is absolutely amazing. There's no doubt that I can already see that already as when I saw you guys at the event. I was like, there's no doubt that we're the next wave that's gonna rise up, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not there's no shade to like Lexus or like Hennessy and
And no
whatnot.
shade at all. I love
No,
them.
but it's our time. That's the way I think. And Sarah, I'm kind of curious too, like what are your big goals for 2022? What do you hope to take Nguyen Coffee
Mm.
Supply?
Oh my gosh, I do have some announcements which I should leak to you all first before we announce it. Um, for 2022, we have some really exciting product expansion in the pipeline. Some product expansion we've teased already on our social media, both my personal and the company. But that's probably gonna be, that's the biggest thing for next year, product expansion, which hopefully you all can help me break when we get there. So new product expansion, meaning new ways for people to enjoy Vietnamese coffee. And then also, one of our other goals in 2022 is to grow our retail presence more in the next year. Up until now, we've always been primarily e-commerce and direct to consumer, and that's still a really big part of our business model. But as we think about the future, specifically next year, we do want to grow more into retail, groceries, supermarkets to kind of round out the customer shopping experience. And because the strategy was to really build awareness and community through digital platforms, and it also coincided with the pandemic, which worked out. And now we want to expand our product offerings in 2022, but also our access in 2022, namely retail.
Well, we're so excited for all of your upcoming plans, and you're definitely changing perceptions about Vietnamese coffee and Robusta coffee, and you've really brought more diversity to the brewing culture by elevating your feed filter. And for all our listeners, please check out Sarah's feed filter with Nguyen Coffee Supply. It's amazing, and just all of her coffee blends are all amazing as well.
Shout out to Sarah for supporting our motherland. So Sarah and I are both Vietnamese. I think a lot of people forget that I'm Vietnamese, but you did a great job of holding it down for us. Thank you, Sarah.
That's true. A lot of people forget that Brian's Vietnamese. But I just love what you're doing for the Vietnamese culture and just Vietnamese coffee in general. So we're very, very excited for all of your plans for the next 5 to 10 years in the foreseeable future. So Sarah, we have one last question for you, and that is, if you could give one advice to someone who is trying to start a business in, let's say, just anything in regards to like food and beverage that relates to the Asian culture, and wants to put more transparency into their product, wants to get their name out there to really like elevate the Asian American community, what would that one advice be, if you could just pin it down to one advice?
Specifically to Asian American products.
That is a tough question.
Specifically to transparency, is that what you said?
Yeah.
It's like transparent what their mission is, and especially like a very culture-based product. And I feel like you're doing it really well, Sanzo, Fly by Jing. It's very culture-based. Mm-hmm. How can that be more transparent? And what advice we have for like a founder in that really niche field?
Okay, that's a great question. I'd say the one thing that's coming to mind that I would encourage people holding on is, what story do you want to tell, right? And I think this relates to an earlier question of like, why is Nguyen Coffee Supply getting so much media attention? Why does it resonate? I really believe it's because we have a really clear and strong story for what we want to tell about Vietnamese coffee, the Robusta bean, but also promoting a culture of diversity, inclusion, and representation, right? So when it comes to maybe like a culture-based product, figure out what story it is that you want to tell. And my advice would be, go really deep with that story, be really, really specific and genuine and authentic, and find a way where it's a story that only you can tell, right? So you can tap into your unique perspective and experience as an individual. And then the kicker is, can you find a way to flesh out that story through broader themes that would resonate with the wider audience, whether or not they're Vietnamese, right? Whether or not they're Asian American, right? I think that's the sweet spot. You don't want to blanket or generalize your story where it's like you have no story, you have no depth, right? But it's like kind of finding that sweet spot where you're going really deep and telling a unique story that only you can tell, but then extracting the layers and the themes that can be relatable across a wide audience, right? I think that's a really, really nuanced key to success that we're still figuring out, because that way you can maintain the integrity of your product and your culture, But also, if you want to build, an expansive business, you can find a way to connect your culture and the integrity of it to a wider audience as well.
I love it. That is amazing advice, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing that. It was awesome having you back on our podcast again. And for our listeners, Sarah was also featured in our Asian Hustle Network Uplifted book. It's called Uplifted Journeys of Abundance, Community, and Identity, where you can read all about Sarah Nguyen's story in one of the chapters. And feel free to pick up a copy if you want to learn more about Sarah's story. And just wanted to thank Sarah again for coming back onto our podcast. We had an amazing time just hearing about your story again.
Oh my gosh, I love hanging out with you both. So thank you for having me, and I can't wait to do it again soon, and IRL too.
I know we can't wait to do that in person for reals. But in the meantime, you guys are in New York. Please stay safe out there.
You. We will. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, fam. Bye.